Hello everyone, Steven here from Redolescence with another video, and these are my top 10 summer fragrances for the year 2013 niche edition. I recently put out a video of my top 10 designer fragrances for the summer of 2013, so if you haven't seen that video, I will leave a link right here for that, so please check that out and then come back and check this one out. Now, these niche fragrances are on this list for one of two reasons. One, because I've worn them in the past and I really like them, so I plan on wearing them again. And two, because they're recent acquisitions of mine. So one of the quick little disclaimers that I want to throw out there before I proceed and actually delve into the actual list is a lot of the reasons that are going to be making this list are because they're recent acquisitions of mine. So I want to be able to wear them a lot this summer. I want to be able to commemorate some great occasions with those fragrances, so that when I smell them again a year or 2 years later, I'll be reminded of the summer of 2013. But a lot of them are also going to make this list, and a lot of them are going to make this list just because I like to wear them, because I've smelled them, or I sampled them, or I used to own a decant of it, and then I upgraded to a full bottle. So I'm very excited to be wearing these next 10 fragrances. I'm actually more excited about these fragrances than I am about the designer fragrances. Not to say that I'm, you know, some sort of a niche snob or anything, because I love both my niche fragrances and my designer fragrances, but I do have more niche fragrances that I've worn in the past. So for that reason, I've already commemorated some great occasions with them, so I'm going to be reminded of them when I'm wearing these fragrances. So I'm just a tad bit more excited about my niche list. But I also want to say that if a fragrance that you really like, that you really enjoy, did not make this list, I do apologize for that. It's probably on this list for one of many reasons. One, I don't have it in my collection, probably. Two, maybe I do, but I ran out of it. Or three, I just couldn't see myself wearing it as often as I'm going to wear these next 10 fragrances. So I want to try to remain as honest as possible. You know, I felt like there are a few fragrances that I could have put on this list, like Virgin Island Water by Creed, Coney Island by Bond No. 9. Those are great summer fragrances, but when I think about it, I really don't see myself wearing it as often as I'm going to be wearing these next 10 fragrances. So there are a lot of fragrances, believe me, that could have potentially made this list, but I just left them out because I genuinely did not see myself wearing them, or I do not anticipate wearing them as frequently as I should or as I would like to, because these 10 fragrances are really going to get a lot of play for me. Lastly, I want to say that this is a list that I compiled. It's not, you know, a list created by other reviewers. It's not a list that I found in a GQ magazine. It's not something that I found online and I wanted to kind of rehash in this video. It's fragrances that are available to me, that I have access to, and that I genuinely see myself wearing it, and I chose the order, and I'm responsible for every fragrance in this list and the order in which it is placed. So without further ado, guys, thank you so much for tuning into my channel and watching my video. These are my top 10 niche fragrances for the summer of 2013. So without further ado, let's start off with my number 10. My number 10 fragrance is one of the more recent acquisitions of mine. This is a fragrance that I picked up, I want to say about a month ago, and I like this fragrance because I'm a huge fan of gourmand fragrances. Now, this fragrance is not necessarily a gourmand. It does contain a little bit of vanilla, actually a lot of vanilla, but a little bit of amber. And amber is one of those notes that it doesn't even exist, to be honest with you. Amber in today's perfumery, and this is something that I read in a book by Mandy F. Tal, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a combination of vanilla, labdanum, and benzoin. So I would say that every amber that you find in a perfume is actually an accord. So this one contains vanilla, but more than anything else, and it's not as much of an amber fragrance as one would expect it to be. Now, this one is marketed for women, and I do have to agree with that, just because it contains an African orange flower note in the heart that gives it this citrus overtone, but a floral mid-tone as well. So if I had to give it a percentile assessment, I would say this one is about 60% feminine, 40% masculine, but again, wear what you like, and if you feel comfortable wearing it, there's no reason why you shouldn't. So from the house of Xerjoff, this fragrance is called Dajala. Now, this is an excellent example of fragrances that I could have put into my list, but I didn't. I know Neo by Xerjoff is an excellent fragrance, and if I owned a bottle of it, it definitely would have made my list. Not only that, it probably would have dominated my list, but I don't. But this fragrance here is also an excellent fragrance for the summer. You are going to get some woody undertones, I believe a little bit of sandalwood, providing it with somewhat of a creamy sweetness, but it's more about the vanilla and the amber than anything. But just keep in mind, it does contain some floral midtones, so if floral notes are off-putting to your nose, I would kind of recommend you sample this one before committing to buying a bottle. But again, number 10 from the house of Xerjoff, it's called Dajala. Number 9 on my list is a fragrance that I picked up about a month and a half ago. It's a brand that Mint New York recently started carrying, so I'm super excited about that. Now, this fragrance was actually composed by Caterina de' Medici, who was the wife of King Henry II in the 1500s, so 16th century, and the recipes were lost, and they were recently discovered in 1966 by the perfumer of this company. So when they were discovered, the perfumer of this company decided to take it upon himself to create a house that he would sell these fragrances under, and he would try to recreate or formulate these fragrances while also staying as true to the original composition as he can. So this is a fragrance from the house of Il Profumi di Firenze, and it's called Limoni di Sicilia. Now, it's an Italian name, Italian company, and the name translates to the Sicilian lemon. And staying very true to the name, it is actually a lemon-based fragrance. Now, how I would like to describe this fragrance is take the strongest lemon note that you've ever smelled in a fragrance before, and now imagine that lemon note 10 times stronger. That's what you're going to get out of this fragrance. Now, it does contain a lot of other citrus, so don't think it's going to be all about the lemon, although it is, but it does contain lime and bergamot and grapefruit, so it does have somewhat of that acidic overtone, but there's more lemon in this fragrance than anything. As a matter of fact, the lemon note in this fragrance is so strong, it's actually very evocative of a lemon cough drop. And it could potentially be cloying, especially if you over-apply. Now, this is eau de parfum concentration, so I would recommend 3-4 sprays in max, but without a doubt, this is the strongest lemon note that I think exists in a single fragrance. Anyone who smelled this can testify that. But again, from the house of Il Profumi di Firenze, this fragrance is called Limoni di Sicilia. It's intriguing, hence the reason I purchased it and the reason why it's in this list. Now, number 8 on my list is a fragrance that I don't wear as often as I would like to. And the reason for that is because this fragrance, to me, I feel like it would be wasted if I were to wear it in a casual scenario. For me, this is strictly formal wear, and this is a fragrance, especially for the price that you're paying and for the amount of juice that you're getting, kind of solidifies the expectation that if I were to wear this one casually, it would indeed be a waste. This one is from the house of by Killian, and it's called Straight to Heaven. Now, with this fragrance, what you're going to get primarily out of this is a very strong rum note in the opening. It's quite boozy in the introduction, but there's also like this cedarwood backbone. Now, although cedarwood is not a very volatile note, so it is constituted as a base note in this composition, despite that, it's actually very strong in the opening as well. I would say that the rum and the cedarwood actually go hand in hand, and it almost has like this very dry and peppery quality to it. Very sophisticated, very masculine, very refined. Even though I think it's marketed as a unisex fragrance, I see this one being a little bit more for the men. But it almost has like this very spicy, peppery quality to it. I believe there's nutmeg in the composition, but very smooth, very sophisticated, very professional smelling at that too. So from the house of by Killian, this one is called Straight to Heaven. Now, number 7 on my list is a fragrance that I'm actually very excited to be wearing this summer. It's a fragrance that does not get a lot of play on YouTube, and I can kind of see why, although recently it's started to make headlines, so to speak. But this is a fragrance that's supposed to imitate the traditional eau de cologne compositions that were discovered in Cologne, Germany in the late 1700s. But it's a fragrance that's an EDC genre, but with a more contemporary or a more modern approach. So without further ado, it's a fragrance from the house of Bon No. 9, and this fragrance is called Eau de New York. Now the name translates to New York water, and this is a fragrance that does indeed resemble the traditional eau de colognes that were composed in Cologne, Germany in the late 1700s. It contains a lot of neroli, so think fragrances along the same lines of Tom Ford's Neroli Portofino, 4711 by Maurer and Wirtz, but this fragrance does things a little bit differently because it contains a petitgrain note. Now for those of you who don't know, petitgrain essential oil is distilled by not only the citrus fruit that the plant yields, but also from the twigs and the bark of the fruit as well. So it smells citrusy, and there's a lot more citrus going on in here than just the neroli. I believe there's bergamot and even lemon. But the way that I like to describe this fragrance is it smells like not only the citrus fruit, but the twig that it's hanging off as well. So it's woody and citrusy at the same time, very modern, different, and very fresh. Again, eau de parfum concentration, this one could choke you out too if you over apply. So once again, from the house of Bond number 9, this one is called Eau de New York. And number 6 on my list is a fragrance that I wore a lot last year as well. It's a fragrance that seems to be getting mixed reactions from several online fragrance communities, but quite personally it's one of my favorites. I think it's one of the most wearable fragrances from this house. Now I do have to caution you that along with Dajala from the house of Xerjoff is probably going to be one of the fragrances that could be potentially perceived as being a little bit feminine, even though in my personal opinion it's just borderline unisex, but because of the floral notes that it contains, it could be potentially perceived as being unisex, or feminine rather. From the house of Amouage, this fragrance is called Reflection Man, or Reflection for Men. Now, I know the bottle looks quite full. I actually do have a small 50 milliliter bottle. This was actually my very first purchase, or my very first fragrance from the house, so I recently upgraded to the 100 milliliter. I found a very good deal for this on FragranceNet, so as soon as I run out of this, I'm definitely going to start clipping into this bottle. Now this fragrance, again, is very floral. You know, it's citrusy because of the neroli, but it's also very floral because it contains a very prominent jasmine note. Now it's spicy at the same time and woody because it contains a pimento pepper note, and I believe a little bit of sandalwood in the base as well. It's actually getting compared a lot to another fragrance from the house of Jean Paul Gaultier called Le Male, and I quite personally don't see the comparison, but I guess because of the spicy nuances, I think that's what allows the comparison to be made, but it's more floral than anything, so keep that in mind. But you are going to get that prominent neroli note in the opening, accompanied by some other citrus fruits as well. So if that's your thing, I definitely think you're going to love this fragrance. So once again, from the house of Amouage, this one is called Reflection Man, or Reflection for Men. Now the number 5 fragrance on my list is yet another recent acquisition of mine. I'm very excited to wear this fragrance. I've actually been wearing this one a lot. I know you can't tell because the bottle is a very solid color and you can't see through it, but I know I made a dent in it. This was actually recommended to me by Frunkinator, another reviewer, so thank you so much. And I've been wearing this a lot. I sprayed it, I sniffed it, I sampled it in store, and I went back a few days later and I bought a 100 milliliter bottle of it, which is the only size that it's available in. So without further ado, this is a fragrance from the house of Eau d'Italie, and this fragrance is called Jardin du Poète. Now, the name of this fragrance translates to the poet's garden, and that's precisely what you're going to get out of this fragrance. As the name implies, this is a fragrance that quite literally smells like a garden. It smells like you're walking into a garden. You can smell the leaves, the twigs, the grass. It's grassy because it contains a vetiver note. It's herbal because it contains a basil note, but it's also citrusy at the same time because I believe it contains a bitter orange note in the opening, possibly with a little bit of bergamot. And although it's not formally listed as a note, I'm given to believe that it contains a tomato leaf note. If I had to make another comparison to this fragrance, it would be one from the house of Hermes called Un Jardin sur le Nid. So if you're familiar with that tomato note, my nose picks up quite a similar note to this fragrance. And then there's also another fragrance from the house of Magnetic Scent called Tinderer, which contains a soil tincture note. And this one does the same exact thing. I know it's not listed as a note, but I'm smelling it in there. It smells like soil, it smells dirty, it smells rooty, grassy, viney. It really just smells like you're walking in a garden. So very unisex, you know, there's nothing overtly feminine about it, although it does contain a few florals, but again, totally unisex in my opinion. From the house of Eau d'Italie, it's called Jardin du Poète, or the Poet's Garden. Okay, number 4 on my list. So now we're getting down to the nuts and bolts of it, and these are fragrances that I'm going to be wearing a lot. Number 4 on my list is one that I'm very excited about. It's one that I smelled at Neiman Marcus, and I came this close to buying it, but I ended up buying another fragrance from the house, which I kind of regret now because it's totally out of season. It's definitely more of like a fall-winter fragrance because of how potent it is. And when I tell you what it is, you're definitely going to get the connection. But this one is a fragrance that I'm very excited to wear. It's from the house of Maison Francis Kurkdjian, and this one is called Aqua Universalis Forte. Now, the fragrance that I ended up purchasing was Absolute Pour le Soir, which is a very animalic, very honeyed type of a fragrance, very sweet, but also quite dirty and very raw and natural, if I can use that term to describe it. This one is the total opposite of that, the spectral opposite of that. This one is very clean, it's floral, it opens up citrusy, and then it dries down to also a jasmine note. So this one I would say is actually very similar to Reflection for Men. I think both of these fragrances can be worn interchangeably. They both satisfy the same social scenarios. You can wear them both under the same occasion. So whatever occasion this one is appropriate for, this one will also be appropriate for. They both contain a rose note, they both contain a jasmine note. Although this one is a lot more about the jasmine note, this one is a bit muskier. So this is about the woody backbone, this one is about a musky backbone that you're going to get from it. And I believe musk is used as a fixative in this fragrance. But again, this is Aqua Universalis Forte, the more concentrated version. There is the original called Aqua Universalis. This is a more concentrated version, and it is available in eau de parfum concentration. Now, the top 3 fragrances on my list, I knew were going to be on my list before I even thought of compiling it, to be honest with you. That's how often I anticipate wearing these next 3 fragrances. Only, I would say one of these fragrances I purchased quite recently, and the other 2 I've had for a while. One of them I've had for a year plus, and number 3 on my list is a fragrance very much like Aqua Universalis Forte. It's musky in the same way, but it's not floral. This one is more about the vetiver, the grassy, and the woody backbone because of the cedar wood note that it contains, but it's much more citrusy than Aqua Universalis Forte is. This one is more about the lemon, and this next fragrance, as the name implies, is more about the bergamot. This one is from the house of Le Labo, and this fragrance is called Bergamot 22. Now, as the name implies, what you're going to get out of this fragrance is a lot of bergamot. There's some other citrus notes in here, I believe, lemon. You're also going to get a very woody, musky, but also grassy backbone from this fragrance because of the cedar wood and the vetiver, and I believe even there may even be a sandalwood note in here, but I believe there's a little bit of vanilla. It's not too prominent, but you can pick up on it just a little bit in the dry down, but there is a vanilla note contained within this fragrance. As the name implies, the number represents that there are 22 ingredients in this fragrance, so there's actually a lot more going on in this composition than what's actually divulged. But again, number 3 on my list, excellent fragrance. I'm very excited to wear it from the house of Le Labo. It's called Bergamot 22. One more thing, I know on online fragrance forums it gets compared a lot to another fragrance from the house of Xerjoff called Neo. I've had a sample of Neo and I've given it a lot of wearings. I quite honestly do not get the comparisons to that. I know I might get burned at the stake for saying this, but this one actually reminds me a lot of a fragrance from the house of Versace called Mano Fresh, because they're both kind of spicy in the same way. I would say, although they're not entirely identical, those 2 fragrances are much closer of a comparison than this and Neo. But anyway, it's just my nose. Okay, number 2 on my list is a fragrance that I'm very excited about. I have been wearing this a lot. It's the second fragrance that I own from this house. I ended up purchasing Tuberose 1 from this house, and I bought it because I was so intrigued by it. It contains this tuberose iris combo that really comes off smelling lipsticky. So for any of you who have experience with Homme from the Dior house, you know how it contains this lipstick note, but it's also accompanied by cocoa, and just that iris note is so pronounced that it does smell like lipstick or a cosmetic bag. And that's what intrigued me to purchase that other fragrance from this house, Tuberose 1. Now, I thought I was going to stop there because, to be quite honest with you, none of the other fragrances from the house really intrigued me, with the exception of Moulin Rouge, which also smells a lot like that fragrance. But when I smelled this fragrance, and I was actually encouraged to do so by a fellow reviewer, Mr. Zayaz81, so thank you, Renee, for bringing this gem and masterpiece to my attention, really. This one is from the house of Histoire de Parfum, and this fragrance is called 1725 Casanova. This fragrance, I mean, I can't believe that I slept on it as much as I did. This is such an excellent fragrance. Think really strong vanilla in the opening, but it's not gourmandish. And then it's accompanied by this beautifully, masterfully blended lavender note that you're going to get from this fragrance, and almond note that's not too pronounced, but every now and then you're going to get a whiff of it. It's just so masterfully blended, so delicious in a way. I know it smells a lot like Invasion Barbare from the house of MDCI, and I totally get that comparison. This is a much cheaper alternative to that fragrance, and I actually enjoy this a lot. It's also quite powdery, so if you're not a fan of powdery fragrances, chances are you might not like this fragrance, but because it's blended so well, I would not dismiss this entirely as a possibility of purchasing it if you're not into powdery fragrances, because you might actually like this very much. So from the house of Histoire de Parfum, this one is called 1725 Casanova. Beautiful, one of the best lavender-based fragrances that I have come across. Excellent vibe that you're going to get out of this. If I had to compare it to one fragrance from the designer side, I would say the powdery quality is similar to that of Burberry Brit, but again, totally different composition, totally different notes, but the powdery quality is similar. So excellent fragrance from the summer. Looking forward to wearing this one a lot. Now, number one on my list is a fragrance that if I composed a top 10 niche summer fragrance list last year, without a doubt it would have been number one on my list last year as well. This is a fragrance, and once you see the bottle and how much I've worn of it, you'll know that the proof is in the bottle, honestly. I love this fragrance. I've been wearing it so much. I over apply with this fragrance. I apply frequently with this fragrance, and as soon as I smelled it in store, I knew I had to buy it. It's one of the only two fragrances from this house that I would actually pay full retail for, and that's due primarily to the fact that it contains many volatile citrus notes. And whenever you buy a fragrance that's been stored in a factory in a hot climate for a very long time, those notes are very prone to being destroyed, for lack of a better term. So that's one thing that I did not want to happen to this fragrance. So this is, I actually paid full retail for it, and I plan on buying another bottle at full retail in the very near future. It was hard to only pick one fragrance from this house, but I wanted to do it for you guys. So from the house of Creed, this fragrance is called Millésime Impérial. As you can tell, I have about, it's probably 10 or 15% full. I do plan on buying another bottle of this, but just goes to show you how much of this I used in one season. I put this away for the winter and the fall, and I busted it back out in the spring, and I ended up wearing so much of it. But guys, I love this fragrance to death. The reason why it's number one, you're going to get this salty overtone with this melon note. I know watermelon isn't formally listed as a note, but you're also going to get a lot of watermelon. It's melony, it's citrusy, and then it dries down to this kind of ambergris base that is very sharp, staticky, but it also has this regal aura to it. It smells quite expensive, and I just feel awesome every time I wear this. You're going to get orange, bergamot, melon, salt, some woody undertones with a bit of ambergris. It's that traditional Creed dry down DNA that you're going to get from about 90% of their other fragrances, but again, from the house of Creed, this one is called Millésime Impérial, originally formulated for the king of Saudi Arabia and his entire court. So this is a fragrance that exudes regality, one of the most appropriate fragrances for the summertime, if not the most appropriate summertime fragrance from the house of Creed, and my personal favorite. It's called Millésime Impérial. So guys, there you have it. These are my top 10 favorite fragrances for the summer of 2013 niche edition. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope that I wasn't rambling on too long. I know I like to talk, but I like it to be informative as well. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate you watching my videos and tuning into my channel. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to send me a PM. leave a comment down below. I reply to all of my comments. Also, if you would like to join my Facebook group, please feel free to do so. I've left the link for that in the description section below. We would love to have you as part of the family. Also, if you would like to hear me speak about another fragrance, I've left a quick link in the description section below again, so you can just jump back and forth in the timeline. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel for future reviews and frequent giveaways. Again, this has been Steven with another video from Red Essence. Thanks for watching.